Ganapati, 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 Ganapati Jai, Ganapati Jai, Ganapati Jai, Ganapati Jai.
Shanti. Wow, what a beautiful voice and a beautiful chant. Yeah. Oh, good. It says plural Swami, so I'm glad that two Swamis.
Yeah, right. I'm the plural. And yes at the end.
Yes, that really makes the song. So it says Swamis and all. I want to emphasize that we've told a lot of stories. You may have things you want to share. We have some old timers here, and even people who never met Gurudev may have things. Those are like the most interesting story. Yeah, that you never saw them physically, but somehow they have something to share. So, anyone like to get the ball rolling?
I can say one story that Shiva Kami shared with me about Gurudev that really stuck with me. It's okay.
Sure.
Shiva Kami, because I've done some training with her in Sarasota. And she told about a time when Gurudev was on a plane with some other swamis, and somebody had come back from the toilets and said how messy it is, how untidy. The toilets were filthy, it was really horrible. And then a little later, someone else went to the toilets and came back and said, I don't know what you're talking about. Because the toilets were absolutely clean and beautiful. And what had happened was, in between that time, Swami Satchidananda had gone to the toilet and cleaned it all up and come back and hadn't said anything. So he just sort of quietly and I think of that story every time I see a teacup sitting around, and I'll just pick it up and take it to the kitchen or something, just because I think of, is that something that he would do, just quietly?
He really put that in our minds too. Particularly the ashram, he really wanted, this is your place. Don't wait for someone else, maybe their job, don't wait for them to pick up something. It's your place. Everyone should feel ownership for the place. And if your plane, you paid for the ticket, it's your plane, clean the bathroom.
You know, when he applied for a visa to stay in America, the visa officer, it was a personal interview, he asked him, so what are the teachings? What are your teachings? Do you know his answer?
Yeah.
What was it, Satya?
Oh no, you tell it better than I
Oh,
yeah.
well, he
But
said,
you can guess though.
yeah, you can guess. He said, when my student goes into a public bathroom, they leave it cleaner than themselves. And on the basis of that, he got his visa.
Thank you, that's good. What's your name again?
Karuna.
Karuna.
Just took initiation yesterday.
Yeah. I want to remember all the initiates' names. Kachi.
Kashi.
Kashi. C-A-K-A-C-H-I. Kashi. Okay,
And
who's
Nigel.
next?
I'll tell about a dream I had. This is really quick.
Okay.
Very vivid dream. And it was a few years ago, so maybe 5 years after Gurudev left his body. And he'd come back, wanted to see everybody. He was in a very youthful body with a green jacket.
Green jacket.
Yeah, I don't know what the significance of the green jacket. And so I got a minute or two with him. And I'm not going to tell you, it's very private, but very real. It was like, it was a question I would have asked, it's an answer he would have given.
Okay.
And then he said, I'm sorry, it's so brief, but I have to, Prem is waiting for me, and we're off to the Apple store. I wanted to see the latest innovations. So that was also totally real. That was totally Swamiji. But I share this because I think it's a great exercise. If Swamiji just popped back in his green jacket, and you signed up for your 2 minutes, and Premanjali, what questions would you ask him? And then, what answers do you think he would give? He has a direct line inside. And if we ask with the right tone of voice, he'll send the answer. That's my dream.
That's beautiful.
It was a wonderful dream.
You know, I had, I think, perhaps the most, couple of strong experiences. No, that I had a situation, a very testing situation, where my mother was almost at the end of her life in this world of ours, and I live in the middle of the countryside, so I didn't have anybody to help me take care of her. And the doctor said she needs 24-hour care. Of course, for me, it wasn't the normal thing to do to put my mother in a nursing home. You know, it was hard. And I had this struggle every day, and I was crying, and I was trying to see if there was any other way I could fix it. And it came the time when my husband was going to go back to work in England, so I was going to be even more alone with my mother. And I remember crying, and I went to my altar, and there had been one nursing home that had one opening, but just one.
One bed?
Yes, but it was a room. She would have a room, but you know.
Okay, yeah.
And I remember I was crying, and I went to my altar, and I just said, please, I do need help. And I was crying. And suddenly, that crying that had been gone for days stopped. It was like if a window had been open. I went quietly, sat on the side of the bed, and I did hear a voice saying to me, if there is a space, she must go in. I never cried again.
Wow.
And when the moment came that my mother was leaving her body, about a month and a half after that, and she said to me, I'm scared. And I said, why are you scared of Mom? Dying? And she went like that. And I said, why? Dad is there, waiting for you, your parents. I'm here to help you. There's nothing to be afraid of. And she smiled, and, you know. So for me, that was such a strong experience. I mean, that inner voice that wasn't mine, saying, just relax, it's a space. And, you know, that was my moment.
This lady has a story. Do you have a story?
Chandra?
Yes.
Did you raise your hand, Chandra?
I've heard all the stories. I love hearing them.
I've known Swami, can you hear me?
Yes.
I've known Gurudev for a long time. I met him in New York when I was studying painting there, just to give a bit of a background.
I saw you in the journey with the master 12 years ago also.
Yes,
I saw
that
you.
was...
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I was looking for something in New York, but I didn't know what it was, and it wasn't yoga. Anyway, I ended up going to a yoga class because a friend of mine wouldn't go on his own. I didn't have any time for it at all. Wasn't interested. Anyway, I went to the class and I gave it I was open. No point going if you're not going to be open, but if you don't like the vibe, you're out the door. So that was the beginning. So I was in New York as a student, and I couldn't stay there, so I came back to Britain. I was always on the edge I was a little intimidated with all the white people, the people wearing white, and I just always felt, well, I was shy and I was always on the side. But Gurudev, he'd sussed me really. The time that I talked in the voiceover in the beginning of the film, that wasn't to do with what was happening in the film, that was another event. And I'd come, I was back in England living, and I felt very no IYI people were in England at the time. I hadn't come to England. And so I used to just go to the ashram about once a year, once every 2 years. And I didn't know anybody, because I was a bit in awe of everybody really. And I wasn't going to talk about this, but this is quite relevant because it's in the film, so I'll talk about this. And I remember, well, what I remember, because somehow remembers what one remembers. I'd arrived in Virginia. It was in the early days. The satsangs were just in the little tiny room, the little house. It was boiling hot. It was in August. Humidity, heat. I'd come from England. I travelled all the way on buses and trains and planes, and a satsang was in progress. So I just came in and thought, well, I couldn't get near the front. I was obviously at the back. Actually, I've got this muddled up. This was in Connecticut because it was in that big room in Connecticut. So I made sure I was at the back because I didn't want anybody to see me, least of all Gurudev. And there was this incredible moment where I got there, I was exhausted, it was all hot, it was blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he looked, you know how I used to look around the room? And he caught me, saw me. And there was this it was just like a dart really, a dart. And I don't know how I got from there to a heap in a puddle at his feet, but I did, and it was, it was a bit sudden really, and there was a bit of surprise in the room, and that's when he said, you see, because he needed to, explain this a bit, I suppose, this is my thinking of it, and you see, he said, all the girls, they love me from all over the world. So that was the context of it.
I can play it for that one. So the ashram was in Connecticut before Virginia, and I was people were at my talk yesterday. No, I was at the Hartford Center, which is about maybe an hour and 15 minutes from the Connecticut ashram. So I had a class that evening, and I really wanted to make it to satsang. So, and you went to the Bhakti Yoga talk. No, I used to put the passenger seat. I used to buckle the passenger seat, so I was riding my guru. This time I forgot. I just drove like crazy to try to make it to the satsang on time. And I was speeding. It's night. It was raining, and my adrenaline's all flowing. And I get to the satsang, and I'm really revved up. And it's packed, but I elbow myself to the front of the room, and I sit right in front of him, and I do this kind of tradak on him, and it's like from West Side Story, how when Tony and Maria met, everything goes into a soft fade. It's just everything goes into a soft fade. I'm doing this tradak, even to the point where my eyes are tearing, and I'm just gazing at Gurudev. My heart's pumping. I just race there, and I go into this kind of altered state from the physiological situation. I pushed myself into some kind of altered state, and I was like really enjoying that. So after the satsang, Gurudev, he'd walk through. We'd be standing there. Maybe he acknowledges, maybe not, but he'd stand there pranaming to him. Then he walks by me, and he turns around, and he says, "Don't do that again." Stop that nonsense. And then I think I said this one of the talks. I said, and he said, "You'll get everything at the right time. Don't do that again. Everything is coming to you at the right time. Don't force anything." And he was he said it as if he was reprimanding me, but it was the most beautiful thing to say to a spiritual seeker. You know, you're going to get everything at the right time. You don't have to do this type of thing. So that was, after I got over the feeling, oh, he's yelling at me, I said, oh, okay, that's really nice to know. Parvati. You have to go in a few moments, share something.
Gurudev story.
No?
Yes, no.
I have a good one that I just told
Okay.
Uma,
Good.
but it's not really mine.
Whoever.
And I don't know if you know Swami Amsananda at the ashram. She's a very tall Swami and very spontaneous, and she just make jokes without even know that she's doing that. I mean, it's a spontaneous, natural, genuine person. And so unfortunately I was not here for the reunion with Gurudev here, because I was at the ashram co-teaching for the basic teacher training with Satya.
12 years ago when he came?
When he came here, I was there, so I saw him giving goodbye to everyone, leaving towards Europe and then India. And then I had really the fortune to see him coming back. So anyway, we received the news that night, was night in America, that Gurudev left the body. So there was really an incredible energy in the ashram, completely different reactions, of any kind of reaction. And then one person, she was really, how do you say, disoriented. And she was, Amsananda at that time, she was still in guest service, and she came down the stair and she said, Swami Amsananda, I mean, Gurudev is not more here. What can we do now? What we do now? And she said, I cannot imitate her. And she said, I don't know. It never happened before.
Did it help the lady?
I mean, I was not there, but she told me something. You cannot believe that she's saying something like that in a so dramatic moment. I think.
That sounds like her, yeah.
Well, another thing it just remind me of that moment. Many times here during this reunion also I remind a lot of that moments I was at the ashram, and there was this very big ceremony for his Mahasamadhi and his
Entombment, yeah.
Yeah, it came priest and people and Swami from India, and it was wonderful. But when he actually arrived, he was put in, at that night in Chidambaram, so the day after people that want to like circumambulate him can do that. So, and I was there. I mean, my reaction was that I just want to be in his presence, and I don't know which reaction, which emotion I was going through. But the thinker really was very incredible for me because I never saw in my entire life a dead person. My parents both died suddenly and I refuse to see them. I have not a nice relation with death. But I have, but Gurudev, I mean, and that was an experience for me to see a dead body, a dead body. And in Chidambaram, I don't know, there was a very, very incredible energy and I really felt him very, very happy. Going, like he was shooting from one side to the other and chanting that some I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, the mortal self. And I felt that so strongly. And from that time, I have no more problem with death in terms of seeing other people. So that was my experience of him not being present physically. But that was very strong to hear him chanting and dancing in Chidambaram.
Wow.
Yeah, I will never forget. And I don't think it was my imagination, I think it was real.
Of course it was real.
Do you want to share a little bit about your experience?
I'll just say a little bit. I was in India when he passed away. I was at his bedside, more or less. There were 6 of us attending him, or 8. And what's very interesting is that he wasn't famous in India, because he had given his lifeblood, in a way, in America, or in the West, I should say. And he would go back to India 1 or 2 months a year, but mostly it was to check in with his family, sometimes get Ayurvedic treatment. So he wasn't promoted as a great guru there. But what happened on the Wednesday before he passed away Monday morning, so it was 5 days prior, he was at an event which was the opening of a movie by the greatest movie star in India, Mr. Rajnikant, who's been a star for 30 years already. He still, color his hair, and he'll act the part of a 20-year-old. He's 65. But he's been a star for 30 years at least. And he announced...
And a star in India means
millions.
people go crazy over there.
Yeah.
They're the gods, like the movie stars. Yeah.
They usually go from the movies to politics. He hasn't gone to politics yet. But he announced that Swami Satchidananda was his guru. So the few days prior to his leaving his body, you know what I was doing? I was cutting out clippings. Every magazine, every newspaper, every day had photos of Swami Satchidananda and a few paragraphs about him, his teachings, and his relationship with Mr. Rajnikant. So it seemed to me he had the karma of great fame, and why not? But it emerged into his life in the last 5 days. And he had gone to he had fainted on Wednesday, and they took him to the hospital. They said, oh, he's okay. And then they checked again. One of the ladies attending him was a doctor. And they checked again a few days later. They said, no, he's going to be fine. He can go on his flight on Monday to America. So I went back to Coimbatore. And so I was there. He was in Chennai, in Madras, yeah. There's long stories involved in this, but I'm just giving you a couple of things. And then we got the word in Coimbatore just a day later that he had left his... Well, we got the word that his situation had become terminal. And then yet a day later that he passed away. But what is very remarkable is that we were calm. There were a few members who were openly grieving, but mostly we were calm. And what I remember, he did go back to America on his flight, but not as a live passenger. And there were, I think, 8 of us who boarded that plane with him. And when we were riding up the escalator to our gate, down below were maybe 20 people who had come to see us off. And you would think we were leaving on a vacation to Hawaii. Because they were saying, don't forget to say hi to Down Under for me. And what did you want me to do about our something celebration? You know, we were just calling back and forth, waving. And during the flight, I never saw anybody in tears. So I just felt like he had purposely calmed us so that we could with dignity make our journey back and then be there for the devotees as they came. And that was his great power. You know, it's so, I don't have words for it, but I know that he can reach into our minds, our psyche, our emotional body, and create the environment, the words, the moods that he needs you to manifest at any time. And he had always said it's not a big thing to leave the body. So he sort of made that manifest there on his last day. Oh, Shanti.
I was leading the...
Sorry,
there was the first-
before you continue, I
yeah.
want to give both of you a big hug
Okay.
because I have to leave.
You're going back to Italy?
Yes.
Oh, I still have your socks. I found that other
And I will this.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you for Hug to everybody. Ciao.
Ciao, bella.
Sorry to interrupt them.
No, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.
It was the first day of advanced teacher training. It was the opening night. We're doing our introductions, and someone comes in and says, it was Sevananda Brahmin. I'm sorry to interrupt, but our Gurudev has just left the body. And we're all just stunned. And we heard that he was in the hospital. We never thought it was anything serious, you know. So I said, okay, well, I think I need to continue with the class. I'm leading this advanced teacher training. I'm also the president of the ashram, but I think I have to continue with the class. And then some people came and said, no, forget about the class. You're the president. We need some leadership here now. We don't know what to do. I said, oh, okay. I was all geared up for ATT. I have to lead. Now I'm the leadership here. Okay. So it was the biggest event we ever had at the ashram. I mean, it was close to Lotus opening, but we had to pull it off like very quickly. And so, like she says, the body came back, and all this organization for thousands of people were coming, and something like what you're saying. There were people disoriented and upset, but I got into this zone that I just was enjoying everything that was happening. There was so much planning, to people not sleeping all night to plan things, and not just plan, but make it happen, manifest it. And I got to this place after a few days where I couldn't imagine what being anxious would be like. And I tend to be a little bit nervous type, but I got a understanding a little bit of what enlightenment is. It was some kind of grace where you have to kind of remember back what it would be like. Because if you're in the flow, you can't even imagine what being anxious is like. Because it's not you. The person who's anxious is only anxious because they're not in the flow, or they don't recognize they're in the flow. So it was one of those, I think the biggest grace Gurudev ever gave me was that time when he left the body. He said, okay, now pull this thing together. I want to have a great goodbye for everybody, and I want to, make sure it happens, And no matter what glitches happened, everything was perfect, just the way it unfolded. And that the description that Parvati gave, there was a, he came back because it was a few days. Originally, he was going to be in Chidambaram in lotus position. We built it that height so that he could sit in lotus, and then we would entomb him there. But the body came back, it was rigor mortis. We couldn't, so we had to put him in a slant, kind of a slant. We couldn't put him in cross-legged position. We had the most fun. Yeah, he was very specific about, you put sand, you put holy ash, there's 3 or 4 different substances that you right up to burying him. And we're in this small, I don't know if you've ever been to the ashram, there's a small little place in the basement of Chidambaram where he's entombed, the lower level. And it was crowded with swamis and some of the ministers and some of the visiting people. I guess it sounds like Parvati was there. And we're filling this thing with him, and we're just filling him up. And we're chanting. It was the most blissful time I think I ever had in my life. It was so much fun. And I could see exactly the way he wanted to go, like that. He wanted us to have a ball, just covering him up. And it wasn't morbid at all. I mean, you think, okay, here's this. We're supposed to break his legs and put him across. Like, no, we can't do that. But we'll put him in this slant, and it was still. I think they had to actually build something a little bit higher. I don't know if you remember. I think it was, even with the slant, we couldn't get him quite in. We had to extend. We had to build something so it would cover him fully. But it was such a sweet time for the Sangha just to say that goodbye to him in that way.
Everybody had put down their egos.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never, ever, before or since, known the ashram to function so absolutely smoothly. They're just,
Exactly. Yeah, that's what he wanted. He said, okay, at least for this moment, you can put them on again. For now, no egos. For me, do this as an offering to me. No egos in this. And that's why there was a certain blissful. Even that's the reason for the bliss. Even without his grace, just by letting go of the egos is the grace. Who's next?
I can say something. Oh, you want to? I'm very fortunate to have been here when he came here. And didn't really make a huge amount of connection with him, except for a few words in the dining room where he said, too many words, he said. Good for me. The grace of the Guru, the words go on. But a few weeks later, 3 weeks later, there was just, when his Mahamah Samadhi celebration was going on, there was this amazing showering of grace, is the only way I can describe it. And it was like he had just thrown out all this grace and blessing to all his devotees. And a lot of us were feeling that here. And I've been fortunate since to go to the ashram 3 times. And the first time I went for the most amazing celebration of 20 years of the ashram and 40 years of Gurudev in America. And he just gave me this amazing gift of a week of blessing. And the funniest time was the second time I went, when I'd rented a car to drive up from Virginia Beach. And I'd been on this very intense course, and it had been quite rigid, and I was in a funny old space. And I rushed up, and I was driving fast, 2.5 hours to get from Virginia Beach, because I drive very fast. And I couldn't wait. I wanted to get to Chidambaram before it closed at sort of 5 o'clock. And I think I made it about 4:45, I just sort of got in. Nobody there. And then I had these words in my head as I came into the presence in Chidambaram. Welcome. I think it would be a good idea if you just sat on this chair for a couple of minutes and calmed down a little bit. And it then went on from there with blessing after blessing.